So cool. So what I'm going to do today is kind of run through some recent updates to our app catalog. I'm going to take a little bit of a different stance here. In previous weeks we've done, and I'll definitely weave this in because I think it's a very common use case. But I do want to spend some time just really quickly with a couple of kind of OS level use cases, and then we can kind of dig in beyond that as we get into more details. So yeah, let me just kind of full screen this. And yeah, let me actually start with I think if we start with kind of the Linux level data. Looks like we have a chat that came in. Yeah, sure thing, Richard. Let me know if you have questions on any of those resources as well. So perfect. So, as we kind of think about, as I mentioned, there's kind of this breakout of what does it look like to take sort of the broader view from a security monitoring perspective of, what overall is happening within your system, kind of at the OS level, try to better understand what's happening within that. And I think because of the ability to kind of take the broader view within the security monitoring dashboards, I think it can be really helpful to kind of look at a couple of the visualizations that can come through. So this is a kind of a classic kind of well, I should say this is a new style dashboard, but very much the dashboard is what I think a lot of people think of when they think of Sumo Logic, especially the continuous intelligence platform. And here we can see kind of a breakout of the kind of active services over time and what the most common services are that are kind of occurring within this particular instance of Linux. So we have 63 total services, and we see SSHD is responsible for kind of the primary, the largest amount of scenarios. And then we also see sort of DH client, Smart D, Shadow, etc. So I think for each of these, it's helpful just to think about the broader scopes of saying, okay, so for SSHD, maybe this is as we expect, because we're anticipating some degree of people kind of accessing resources by way of SSH, and that sort of is an indicator that it would be a higher volume activity. But in some of these cases, we might see something that we didn't expect to see, like the shadow service. Maybe network manager is as expected, but session or collector for sure makes a lot of sense if it's essentially it's kind of a meta analysis of the collection process. But then we might see certain services that we didn't expect to run for whatever reason. Maybe we see login D, but maybe that's not a service that your organization is typically using. Maybe you've spun up a different library to tackle that particular use case. So just something to keep in mind of kind of as we search for these kind of needles in a haystack, what some of the considerations are that I think would be helpful to kind of address. And so another way of looking at this, and this is getting more into the kind of security analytics perspective, is what happens when so here we're looking at privileged activity within various Linux instances. And I think it's helpful to think about here what happens when something falls outside the expected range, right? So we're looking at sudo attempts here, and we're looking at outliers. The pink triangles actually indicate where it falls outside the threshold. And so, in this case, like I'm probably less interested in the lower thresholds, because this is just telling us we're seeing like a drop off in activity, fewer people performing sudo attempts, and we're looking at 7 days. So you'd expect that over a week there would be kind of these lulls in activity. But then we also do see these spikes in activity, and while they're not massive spikes, they do fall outside of the threshold that we anticipated. So as a result, we may want to look at, okay, what does it look like for each of these thresholds to cross over, and then how do we actually consider what each of these thresholds sort of tell us, right? So I would kind of just take a wild guess here and assume that it may be that we're seeing a spike in sudo attempts, and that may actually in some cases indicate sort of, let's say, a brute force attack, and then maybe we may want to actually dig into the specifics for each of these kind of thresholds. And we can see here at this particular point, if we zoom in, and we can absolutely, we're looking at the query, and we can actually sort of adjust what the specifics of the outlier are. We can change the thresholds, but we just have kind of the default settings here. And we can see that at this time, it looks like, around 2:45 in the morning, we're seeing some spike in activity. If you're an international organization, you would expect 24/7 activity, but maybe this does fall outside the expected range, especially if this is like indicating physical access to a particular resource, that this may be something you want to kind of drill into. So just want to call out a specific kind of thing that jumps out here as we kind of, consider all the angles here. Pseudo failures over time would also be helpful to look at. We're not seeing massive spike or massive numbers here, but we do see some significant spikes in some of these of, crossing over kind of that 5 to 6 range of number of failures. But if we did see a spike of something much more significant, then I think, it would certainly be an indicator that each of these needs to be addressed and kind of considered. And we certainly don't want to see pseudo failures. It's largely an indicator of maybe a couple failed logins here and there is acceptable, but and this ratio even of 252 to 41,000 attempts seems reasonable, but it's just something that we could certainly keep an eye on as we kind of address the things moving forward. So cool. So kind of keeping within a little bit of the OS theme, let's kind of switch gears at this point. Let me just do a quick time check to Windows here. And I think this will be a great example where also we can consider what it looks like to look at things at kind of like the security monitoring perspective versus security analytics. So just a couple quick things to note here. Again, this is the quote unquote new style of dashboard. One of the things that comes along with that, in addition to being able to integrate in metrics with your kind of within your dashboard. I think another consideration that comes to mind, and sorry, let me just do a quick check of, okay, great. Oh, actually, yeah, just had a question come in from Richard. Were we looking at pseudo failures in a global sense or pseudo failures for a particular user? Can we do both? So let's actually jump back really quick while we're on the topic. So yes, so in this sense, or in this particular scenario, we are looking at it in a global sense. You do have the ability to actually drill down to the user level. And I was going to kind of jump into the template variables or filters, but instead let's do that here within this dashboard, just so it's in the context of Richard's question. So as we think about the global sense, though, the asterisk here indicates a wildcard, which means we're looking at all the data across the board. But we can also look at scenarios where a particular type of user. So in this case, we're looking at root types of logins. So we're actually drilling down into those specifics. And we're just filtering for that. And you can see, because it's less data, we're only looking at 40 attempts and actually 0 failures, which is great. We certainly don't. We want people to be confident in the way that they use root. And so it's probably a great indicator there's no failures here. But here's where you can actually, set that filter. And so you have the ability to do both, Richard. So hopefully that's helpful. So another scenario, and I want to just quickly call out an example where, for each of these, where we have the ability to actually set the filter up or the template variable up to actually design in based on what those requirements are. So here we're actually looking at a particular computer, and I mean, you could do that through the template variable, or in this case we're actually doing it through just as an alternate look at things. We're doing that by way of the actual honeycomb visualization, which is something that's available within the new dashboards. And so for each of these, like in this case, we only have one computer. If we expand out the amount of time, it may be the case that there are more resources that pop up here. We can see how the data loads in. So it looks like we just got one over even just that whole past week. For the last 24 hours, though, we do see within service stopped, we do basically see a scenario where we have multiple computers that we can drill down into. We can actually see the summary for each of these, the associated logs, error signatures, etc. We can see which services stopped or which services are stopped in association with that. And then we actually see in the more kind of tabular, granular format, we see all of these computers and attached services for each of them. So just a little bit different lens, kind of looking at how to kind of filter through the data and get down into the specifics. Speaking of specifics, so that was more of a security monitoring view. When we look at security analytics, and we start getting a little bit more detailed, we can see where Windows update events is getting into really the specifics of an event. So we're seeing event ID of, the most common occurrence, it looks like, would be 17 in this case. So we could do a quick search to understand what that event ID might indicate to us. But we see kind of maybe a gradual downward slope in the associated computers for each of them. So yeah, so just a little bit different lens into how you might tackle that. I do want to call out too that within the app catalog, you can set up and decide what kind of the out of the box content is that's most relevant for you. So you have the ability to kind of drill down into each of these. If you're an Amazon shop, there's certainly a wide array of options here. For Azure, we also have quite a few options. Today was really largely focused more on the operating system, kind of Linux and Windows side of house. But there are also you could look at kind of the metric side of house if you're actually running potentially even your own resources and want to do some deeper digging there. This is where all kind of the collection occurs, and then you can set up, whether it's a hosted collector, installed collector, depending on your particular use case. I think it could be really helpful for that particular kind of ability to drill down. So cool. So with that, I'm just going to kind of drop into the chat here. Again, I'll just kind of drop in the free trial sign up so that you can have that option if you want to get into the details. So Richard is asking, how do we set up a meeting with a sales engineer and salesperson for pricing options? Also, do we have any Zscaler web proxy logs in our demo, and Cisco router switches and firewalls? So cool. So yeah, Richard, feel free to reach out to me at jdunne@sumologic.com, and I can absolutely connect you with kind of the right resources to make sure that you have the right folks that you can chat with and kind of consider. In terms of Zscaler, we have Zscaler internet access, private access, and web security as kind of these out of the box dashboards that you can certainly put to use. These are fairly actually recent releases in our app catalog, and Zscaler is definitely a huge sort of partner for us that we do have a lot of shared customers with as well. Cisco, we have ASA and Meraki, so I imagine ASA is a little bit more relevant for your use case. This gives you a quick lay of the land. But yeah, if you sign up for a free trial, we can absolutely show you how you can get off to the races with giving that a go. So yeah, so hopefully that's helpful, Richard. I just also wanted to call out, let's see, you're also welcome to reach out at sales@sumologic.com, or just reach out to me directly, and we can make sure that we kind of get you connected with the right folks to make that happen. Let's see. Perfect. Oh, great. Okay, Richard. Yeah. So looks like you've got Meraki. We can do a quick rundown actually of that too, just since you mentioned it. Wasn't sure if that was something that was also on sort of your radar. So just one moment here. Let me reshare. And we can look at Meraki here. So yeah, so we've got events, flows, the flows allowed and rejected, flows over. So you'll see some parallels with some of the dashboards that we covered today. URLs overview. If you hit the preview button, then you'll be able to see like the actual visuals of that. So you can see that it's kind of broken out. You can do like geo mapping, which is really helpful, I think, for a lot of network data in particular. Outliers are shown here and similar to what we looked at earlier. So I think that should be a good use case for you in particular, based on kind of the data sources that you have coming in. So so perfect. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna just kind of, I'll hang on here for another couple minutes. We're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm happy to just leave some time here for questions as they come in. Looks like we've got a pretty strong attendee list, so feel free to just pop into sort of the Q&A or into just the chat itself, and just fire off any questions that you might have, and I can make sure that I sort of connect you also to the right resources, whether it's a URL or to the right teammates. So with that, thanks so much for joining today's session. I'll stay on for another minute or two, but really appreciate you joining. We have more sessions throughout the week, and we actually run these monthly as well if you wanted to connect an additional teammate. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon. Cool. So we had a question come in from Chakawira Sanganza, which was, how do you connect the monitoring tool to the application? So just to make sure that I think I'm understanding the connection, or the question correctly, that when we think of the monitoring tool here, we're describing sort of the Sumo Logic monitoring platform, which was what was demoed today. And then, so how Sumo describes applications or apps would be sort of the out-of-the-box dashboards within our app catalog. So I think you may, though, be referring to bringing in like application data into Sumo Logic. So maybe you have within your organization your own set of data sources or types of data. Okay, perfect. So thanks for confirming that. So as far as bringing in your own application data, you do have the ability to sort of write out that data to syslog or whatever your preferred choice is. It could even just be raw data or JSON data. And then you would just set up either a hosted or installed collector. So either it would be a local collector or a Sumo hosted collector in the cloud. And so for either of those cases, you're able to just bring in vanilla data, and you just have to set up kind of how much you're tailing into that file and how granular you want, right? If you want to get really detailed and all the way down to debug errors, et cetera, then you for sure have that option. If you want to have more of a summarized, only when significant types of like maybe even like put requests, for example, are coming into your system, you do have that option as well. So you can absolutely tune that in a very custom way, but we also can give you some kind of out of the box quick repos on GitHub that can hopefully give you like a quick sense of how you would spin that up, even through like Terraform or CloudFormation if you want to do it in a more automated way. So hopefully that's helpful. And yeah, thanks for clarifying. It sounds like you're more referring to your own applications within your organization. Awesome. So great. So yeah, I'll actually stay on for the last minute or two until 10:30 Pacific time here, in case other folks do have any questions. Yeah, again, thanks so much for joining today's session. Really kind of, I think, interesting conversation that has come of this as well. And we're more than happy to connect you again with our sales team or whoever the right resources may be based on what you're looking to answer, or even for that matter, we could address it in sort of the next webinar as well in kind of a live setting. So yeah, thank you, Dave, so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day all. Have a good one.